much everybody that got injured came real close to death. Why? Because we couldn't really save them. There wasn't anything medically advanced at that point. Didn't really know about blood groups, didn't really know about how to control infections. It was just a terrible tragedy, terrible tragedy. So we get then from 1918, we come into the 1920s. 1929, or I should say 1939. Oh, in the 20s they figured out what blood groups were, so they could give you a matching blood transfusion. That was helpful. In the First World War, they just gave you anybody's blood. Either you lived or died. Why did they do that? Because you were on your way to dying anyway. So this was a chance. And it worked. It worked. They were called battlefield transfusions. One guy would be bleeding, they'd grab another one, hook the guys up, and one blood would go into that. Of course, that'd be the last transfusion he could get if it was incompatible, because he would have made antibodies to it. But they didn't know any of that stuff then. We begin to work very much with immunizations. Immunizations are now being considered. So, by the time we get to the late 20s, early 30s, we've got some possible immunizations. And a big disease killer in the early part of the century here was diphtheria. Spell it right. Everybody says diphtheria, but it's diphtheria. Yeah, diphtheria. Man, this took out households. Somebody would get it and pass it around to everybody else, and that would be it. They didn't have anything to give you for, tetanus. And by the way, this is still in third world countries, people are dying of tetanus. What does that mean? It means you get a wound infected from some soil out here, and it's going to create sepsis, you're going to die. Classic stories are people who break a bone, and they have the bone set, and then they get really, really sick because the wound was not cleaned, and when they put the cast on, great anaerobic situation, that's exactly what tetanus wants. By the time they take the cast off and look at it, the whole arm has to come off. Those cases are replete. Well, they figure out how to get an immunization against tetanus, and you should be up on your tetanus shots for the rest of your life. You know, every 15 to 20 years you should get a tetanus. And then the other one that got people was pertussis, whooping cough. So the first really effective childhood immunization was the DPT shot. The DPT. That was the first effective childhood immunization. What a bunch of lives that saved. It was amazing. Diphtheria was a terrible disease, and you died a terrible death. And tetanus was no better. You died a terrible death with that, too. Death, at one point in our history, was referred to as the angel, well, was referred to as the relief of suffering. There was nothing else that you could do to relieve suffering except to die. That was the end of your suffering. So for many years, pneumonia was thought of as the angel of death, because old people would get really ill, and then they would get, bound to the bed bound, and then they would get pneumonia, and pneumonia would take them out. That was called the angel of death. Now we're so smart, we've got all kinds of antibiotics, so you can get over this, and you can get over that, and you can get over something else, and you can live in agony for many, many years. Isn't that kind of us? Right. So by the 30s, this is what's going on. And that did change the quality of life, because now you had a possibility of having children that could live to be adults, if they got over all the other things that came along. 39, they started working in 29. Let me tell you, they worked from 29 to 39, and finally came up with penicillin. got tired, so he backed out, and you don't ever hear of him anymore. But Fleming invented essentially penicillin that became available in 39. So by 1941, when the Second World War started, WW2, The War to End All Wars, that's another great book, penicillin was there in the battlefield to save wounded lives. So they could give them blood and blood products. They could give them fluids, because they had learned how to make intravenous fluids by then. They could give them penicillin as an antibiotic, and they could save lives that they could never save before. It made a huge difference, and you know what the difference was? At the end of World War II, you had a surviving veteran cohort. A couple of World War I guys survived, but not very many, not very many. And I think the wife of a World War I veteran just died as the last surviving widow of a World War I veteran, but he married her when he was like 90 and she was 18 or something like that. And some fun match. Okay, so in 1945, we emerged from the Second World War, and we have a large number of surviving veterans, which is what led to the formation of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Now, the Veterans Affairs have gotten a lot of bad publicity lately because there were times when veterans couldn't be treated as quickly as they needed to be, and they had to wait for treatment. So everybody in this country said, well, that's disgusting. You should be able to call up and get an appointment with any doctor, anytime, within 24 hours. How many of you have had that experience, that you could get an appointment within 24 hours with your doctor? Raise your hand if you could do that. Okay, how many people have not been able to do that? Right. So let me tell you something. Socialized medicine in Canada, where you don't pay for treatment, have longer lists of people waiting for procedures than any VA hospital anywhere in the country. People who've been diagnosed with cancer have to get in line for surgery, and they often have it after it's too late to contain the primary disease. We are facing something like that in the future, where it's going to take a long time to get an appointment with a physician. This is going to be a big problem for the national healthcare system that is attempting to be worked on right now here. If you want to get a doctor's appointment right away, you have to join a practice where they have concierge medicine. A few doctors get together and they say, well, you know what, we're going to limit our practice to 400 people. We'll give them the best service that we possibly can. The other 3,600 that used to come here, not going to be able to come here anymore because we can't fit them in. We're taking care of the 400. So you're going to develop a double class of medical care in this country. And the Canadians are coming down here for procedures because they can have the procedures done faster here. And some of our people, because we really don't want to pay $200,000 for surgery, are going abroad for surgery. Surgical centers are developing in places like India. Wouldn't you want to go there for surgery? Maybe, maybe not. But there are exclusive clinics that are developing to take care of expats coming into the country who want their surgery done and have it done right away. So something like bypass surgery is done much less expensively and much quicker in some alternative sites. So keep your eyes on what's happening with healthcare in this country. Some of you are interested in medicine. Some of you want to be PAs. That's where medicine is going to be practiced, with PAs and nurse practitioners.